You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt Migaki, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
What's going on? What is happening? I got to tell you a few things before we jump right into this very strange episode of the Tone Mob Podcast. And one of those things is about Sinusoid custom cables. Man, we love the Soid. You guys need the Soid. Even if you don't know it yet, if you have not yet experienced the glory that is purchasing something from the boys over at Sinusoid, well, I think you should rectify that. And might I recommend you go with the tiniest soldered patch cable on the market, the Sinusoid Sliver. That's solves a lot of problems for a lot of people. It's itty-bitty, it's rock solid, and it's got a 100-year warranty. I don't know what more you could possibly ask for out of a patch cable. I mean, it's just about perfect, right? I don't know. That's up to you to decide. But if you slide over to sinusoid.com, you can check out the Sliver and all the other fine offerings they have to get your signal from your guitar to your amplifier in the best way possible. So make sure to check out sinusoid.com. And of course, I'm not coursed. I don't know what that's a thing. I don't know. I can't make any sense out of anything anymore. Of course, I got to talk to you about Gun Street Wiring Shop. Gun Street Wiring Shop out of Bend, Oregon, making custom wiring harnesses for your guitar. Whatever you might need. You never know. You might be wanting to get crazy. Maybe you got some new pickups in, and they're wired for 4-conductor, and you want to get splitting, and you want to have push-pull pots, and you want to have phase switching, and you want to have all kinds of crazy things. Well, Sean can hook it up. Or maybe you just want normal stuff. Maybe you just want to upgrade what's already there for better quality components, for better quality tones. It's TOANZ, not, what you were thinking. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com. Make sure and check them out. And if they don't have exactly what you need, definitely email them with any kind of crazy idea that you might have. Sean will make it happen because that's how he rolls. And it's awesome. So make sure and check out gunstreetwiringshop.com. Woo! All right. It's weird today. Let's get weird with it. So before we get started, I need to tell you something about this episode because this is kind of a weird one. So I originally had some others scheduled for today that were supposed to go out, but my most recent interviews, for some reason, my audio's all messed up. I'm working with my company that I use to do these remote recordings to try to get that resolved, but obviously that doesn't do any good right now. So what I wanted to do today was actually something I was planning on doing in coming weeks, but we just had to shuffle things around and move this up to the front. So what we got here is a example of one of our Patreon episodes. This is probably one of my favorite Patreon episodes. I've talked about it here and there, how we go off onto some deep tangents sometimes, and we never know where those conversations could go. But basically, this is the extended version of the interview I did with the guys from Electrofoods, Matt and Carl. Really great guys. And if you missed that episode, go back and listen to the main episode first, which was back on. Let me look here. Wow, it was actually a lot further back than I thought. It's way back on episode 91 is when those guys came on. We recorded an extended version for Patreon, and that is what we're going to play now. And we go into robots, we go way off the deep end on it. But it's a lot of fun. It was one of my favorite interviews I did, so I'm glad to take it out of the Patreon section and put it out there for you guys to listen to. So that's what's going on today. That's where it's just going to jump right into weirdness. We're just going to go. We're going to hit the ground running. But if you didn't get a chance to go back and listen to when they were first on, it might make more sense to pause this one and go back and listen to the first time Matt and Carl were on. But so that's what's happening today. It's a little bit out of the ordinary. We're going to try to get back into the normal swing of things starting next week. I am working with the company on getting this file situation resolved. So hopefully we can get it to where it's acceptable audio and what you're used to hearing, basically. But until then, here is the episode with Matt and Carl, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. So I'll shut up and not shut up at the same time. And I'm not going to stop the recording. I'm just going to cut it there in post.
That's
We'll do it in post.
And now we're in the Patreon section of the episode.
Right.
Doesn't that feel so
Fancy.
much weirder? Look at that. Everything's kind of purple now.
It is. I feel like there's
I think that dark hallway came back.
yeah.
It's back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we talked about Philly cheesesteaks. I don't know which one of you I was talking to, but on Instagram a little bit, because I mentioned that in the Strymon episode, we discussed steak sandwiches, and they were very careful not to call them Philly cheesesteak sandwiches, although they were from the East Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they knew enough to not go there.
Yeah, and I know enough not to go there too, but also I've had what was called cheesesteak sandwiches in various places in the country, but never in Philadelphia. I don't actually know what constitutes a real, legit one, other than it has to be in Philadelphia. So educate me, please.
Yeah. So I think Carl and I, neither one of us growing up here.
Yeah.
Caveat number one. Caveat number two, we're both vegetarian.
But not
Having
always.
said-
You mentioned you'd had sausages before.
But I was vegetarian by the time I moved to Philly.
And me
Okay.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've never had a meat Philly cheesesteak.
I actually have had a meat Philly cheesesteak because when I was in Delaware, I would have one in Philly on occasion. So I have had them.
Okay.
And I can vouch for the fact, which is what I was about to say, that if you go to the right places in Philly, there are excellent vegan and vegetarian Philly cheesesteaks.
That is true.
Like very, very excellent. And I think the key isn't so much the meat itself. The meat is really, in a Philly cheesesteak, I think it's really just sort of a vehicle for the bread and cheese and and the peppers and onions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the cheese needs to be like a cheese whiz kind of thing.
Well, I would argue that that's not true, but that's just my own aversion to cheese whiz. I'll get crucified.
Carl's also from upstate New York, as we mentioned earlier.
I'll get
Home of the garbage plate.
outside of Rochester. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's
I'm
our
at least
thing.
from this state, I will say.
I don't know if that gives you any more.
No, it really doesn't,
authority.
because Williamsport's garbage. But
yeah.
so, yeah, and I guess in the Patreon portion, I can very directly badmouth the one town that I grew up in.
You can if you would like.
I didn't really intend to go there. It just kind of,
But
had an honest moment there. Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and for me, if there is a vehicle for bread and cheese, I'm in.
Well, of course.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah. I think that the Amoroso roll is key. So it's
the bread is a big thing.
yeah,
there,
like you
and
got to get
that's-
the right. I mean, it's the hoagie roll, basically.
yeah, which is yeah, and that's a funny thing too, is because I moved here and I was like, oh, it's not a sub,
Right.
because
Yeah.
where I'm from they call them subs, but then there's areas like a half hour away and they're like, oh no, this is a hero.
Yeah, I was a linguistically confused kid because like both of my
Yeah.
parents are from Indiana, and I was born in Ohio, and I lived in Ohio, Rochester, New York, Berea, Kentucky, and Williamsport, Pennsylvania by the time I was 5.
I didn't know you lived.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I lived in Rochester for like 4 months.
Huh.
So it was when my dad was finishing grad school and doing some postdoc work.
Where?
Um,
RIT?
University of Rochester.
U of R. Okay.
Yeah. And he was there for 3 or 4 months and hated it, and it was awful. And so he got his old research position back at Miami University, yeah, whatever, the Miami that's in Oxford, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
Not
that
Miami in
one.
Florida.
Yes,
yeah.
everyone knows that one.
Which is
Obviously not
like
Florida.
Yeah.
I was sitting here going like, Miami. I didn't hear Florida. Did I just black out for a minute and he said
No,
Florida?
you didn't.
I didn't hear it. Okay.
You didn't.
I thought the same thing, Blake. I
Right.
was confused as well.
All right, good.
Yeah, so it's the Oxford, Ohio, that's the town I was born in. I was born in Oxford, Ohio, because my dad was getting his PhD there. So moved back to there for another 6-8 months, and then he got like a temporary teaching position at Berea College in Berea, Kentucky, which is like this like super like progressive bastion in the middle of Kentucky, which I just thought it was an awesome little town. I didn't want to move away, but I was like 3.5. So I did kind of figured that out later. And then we moved to Williamsport. But like with all of that, like the whole, I was saying pop instead of soda, the whole, the first 5 years of my life. And Williamsport, like the vast majority of people in Williamsport, and this is less true now, but in the 80s, this was very true. The vast majority of people in Williamsport, like their parents are from Williamsport, their grandparents are from Williamsport, their great-grandparents are from Williamsport. And so like, and pre-internet, the knowledge of like other linguistic idioms was very minimal among the children. So like I got a lot of like, what are you talking about? Kind of things when I'd say something funny.
The children weren't well versed in linguistic idioms, huh?
Yes.
Huh.
I mean, I think that's still a continuing thing, internet or not. I feel like the children aren't necessarily hip to every region's term for everything.
Yeah, I agree, but they're at least knowledgeable that there are other regions with other phrases out there, and that like the language changes much faster because you find new phrases from the internet. Like
that's true.
It's not this like it. Just having the knowledge that there are people who talk differently somewhere else would have been helpful.
But it also
for my happiness as a child.
Yeah, but it also has a homogenizing effect to a degree as well.
It does.
which is fine. I'm really just talking about not traumatizing the children who move to a new place.
I don't think that's a. I mean, come on, it's made you who you are today.
It has, yeah, that's true.
So let me touch on this. You mentioned something. Since I mean, food is really important. As much as this is supposed to be about guitar pedals, it's really not. It's really about food.
It's all about food.
So the pop versus soda thing. I never grew up with it. Like being real strong either way. Like just depended on like whose house I was at. They would call it one thing or another. But one thing like that I noticed, at least around here, that seems to be like less of a thing, and instead we just call the beverage what it is. So like and not to mean it's like don't like I want to get me a pop. It's like I'm gonna go get a Mountain Dew, or I'm gonna go get an orange soda, or I'm gonna go get like a Pepsi or a Coke. Like it's not so much a pop or a soda thing. It definitely is a thing, but at least around here it's like I'm gonna go get a root beer. Like the beverage itself was. Yeah. I didn't think of that until just now.
Yeah, I like you're saying that, and it's kind of blowing my mind because I think I said the whole thing about pop versus soda. I don't know that I say either of those at all anymore. Like I think I just call the thing by what it is.
Mm-hmm. And that seems like what we did as a kid, mostly.
Yeah. Like if I'm ever in the mood for a sweet carbonated beverage, I'm probably in the mood for something specific. Or I discover that like I did today, I live pretty close to Chris Morgan, Handsome Beard Etching, or I work. I don't really live. I have a commute. So he and I commute to about the same area and then drive further apart when we go to work. So we meet for lunch, and so we don't have to ship enclosures back and forth. Yeah.
Convenient.
Yeah, exactly. So I met him at this lovely Greek restaurant that we're both a little bit obsessed with. And they had white birch beer, which is maybe a thing that you don't know.
Wow, I don't think I've heard of that.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Sounds like tree beer.
White birch beer.
Yeah, so it's like it's birchy root beer, but it's clear. So it looks like Sprite.
that's interesting.
Yeah,
It's kinda...
that is a Pennsylvania Dutch thing, like so a southeastern Pennsylvania thing.
Yeah,
All these regional
That's
things
always...
are so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like
We're so homogenous over here in the Northwest in some ways. We don't have
Well,
things like that.
I mean, we've got some homogenizing tendencies over here too.
That's very true, and I think I was reading an article this person wrote about just like linguistics and all that in general, and as broadcast happened, regional dialects have slowly faded away.
Yeah.
They're less and less strong than they were, a generation ago or two generations
Mhm.
ago, because we all grew up watching the same newscaster and TV shows,
Sure.
and people go to these schools to and get coached so that actors and stuff like that, so they don't have an accent. So
Yeah, that
that's
actually
interesting.
reminds me of a video I seen that I actually hated the concept. It was, and maybe you've seen it. The gist of it was this guy was going to like not speech therapy, but class to get rid of his Boston accent.
Yeah, I
So
remember
that he would
hearing
sound
about
more
this.
professional, or like, I think this guy might have been
Yeah.
trying to be an actor, but they were like trying to get his dad to like break his Boston accent, and I was like, no, that's lame.
Yeah,
Like roll with that. Like that's part
Right.
of like, otherwise you just sound like a boring Pacific Northwesterner like me. Like with like
Yeah.
I've always said, and I don't know if I've gotten to arguments with people about this before, but I feel like not necessarily like Southern California, but like Washington, Oregon area, I feel like our accent is to not really have one. We kind of say things how Webster says to say them for the most part. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
true, but that's the way I've always viewed it. Does that make any sense?
It totally
know.
does, and
I mean-
I don't actually know how true that is. I mean,
Yeah.
I think every region has its own little things, and some of them are more subtle than others.
That's true. That's probably
I don't
true.
I don't do it so much anymore, but I used to listen to a lot of linguistics podcasts. And like, yeah, like there are people who know about all those little things, and they can, there's weird little nuggets in the way you say something that you can find for pretty much anywhere. But for sure, some area like northern New Jersey, working class Italian background,
Mm-hmm.
northern New Jersey is probably going to sound a certain way that you're not going to find anywhere else.
Yeah, and I love that. I think that's
I
fantastic.
love it too. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, my best friend's a lot of his family's from like Newark, and it has a kind of almost New York thing, but it's different.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's so cool.
It's
I love that stuff. I mean, it's like the homogenizing influence of broadcast and the internet. Like that's fine. It's going to happen. Like you to some extent you can't stop it, but like.
True.
In some ways, maybe it just makes those regionalisms more precious and like more cool, and should be celebrated even more, because if they're strong enough that they can survive the internet, then there's something, I guess, really special about that.
Yeah,
That's
That
true.
makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I'm also I don't want to get up on a soapbox, but I'm also like really against linguistic prescriptivism. So like. A lot of those rules that they teach you in school about how language works and about like grammar and stuff were basically like made up by really uptight white guys in the 1800s who wanted English to be more like Latin, and they literally just made up a lot of those rules.
Well, it seems a lot like music theory. So like,
Yeah.
there's all these rules that people take apart from all these people, and I remember in class like. Because I went to, I took a lot of music classes, and, one of the things was like, I'd get a grade back on a paper and be like, oh, this doesn't follow, you broke the rule here. I was like, yeah, but it sounds so much better, and, the teacher would be like, well, Bach did that, but you can't yet. And it's like, well, what do you mean I can't yet? It sounds cool. They hate, it's wrong to have parallel moving, like chords, like power chords moving back and forth is like a thing that's like wrong in classical music, but it sounds awesome. So like, it's really funny that, but none of those rules existed when all of those people did those things. You know, there were kind of ideas of what they thought music was and how they organized it and whatever else. And there were some kind of general things that followed. But still, you know, and that's why you have like, there's a bunch of different types of scales and stuff like that. And if you look at like old songbooks, they'll have like, you know, oh, this is like a Balkan version of this scale, and it has these different things to it because people in the Balkans incorporated their folk music, and that's, you know, part of that. And that's, I don't know. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I love that stuff.
So Matt, like kind of, since I guess we can talk about music stuff a little bit, whatever. But,
we have to.
But you were saying that you said you do mechanical engineering, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. So you said you approached music from a mechanical engineering perspective. How so? Can you like go into that a little bit more? I'm not.
Yeah, sure.
I'm mechanical, but I'm not an engineer, so I don't quite follow.
So I knew very early on that like every octave is multiplying the frequency by 2. Right. And so, and then like everything else kind of flows from that. So like if 2 notes are going to sound good together, then the fundamental frequency of each note is probably a low whole number relationship, like 2/3 or 3/2 or 3/4 or something. Like if you divide the frequencies between them like that, you'll get it. You know, you're not going to get like an irrational number or something that like goes on forever. Some like, you know, it's going to be something you can write nicely as a fraction. And the nicer the fraction is, and the more you can reduce the fraction, probably the more pleasant those 2 notes will sound together.
That's fascinating. That's really interesting. I've never heard it explained like that before, but it makes sense.
Yeah, and so like I was coming at it from like I learned a bunch of stuff about how frequencies work and how resonance works and all of these sort of mechanical concepts that are the building blocks of how musical instruments work. And so like I knew that stuff from sort of the physics and engineering stuff before I really knew much about the music theory side, but I knew just enough of the music theory to sort of know how they were connected. And then later, as I like, you know, I took my mechanical knowledge and tried to go back and learn music theory and was kind of just like, what? This is all BS. This doesn't make any sense.
That's funny.
Like, why do we have 8 letters for 12 evenly spaced notes?
Good question.
Like,
I don't know.
That's just garbage as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's just awful.
So with all that in mind, do you ever look at a guitar or other musical instruments from a design perspective and you're like, that's dumb. Why is it that way? If we just make this slight tweak, it would actually, you know, intonate properly or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, intonation's tough because it has to do with like how the string length vibrates or how the string length changes as it vibrates. So like when the string is bending down over the nut, it's sort of rolling down over the nut, and so it's getting slightly shorter, and then it's coming back up. You know, so like in some ways you're never going to get intonation perfect.
Right.
But I do like it also. Having all of that knowledge also keeps me from wanting to build guitars because like I just knowing how precise all that stuff has to be and like, you know, like having to hand place frets and stuff. I just like I'm so aware of how wrong it's going to be like when I try to put it in, and I'm going to like, you know, have to like, you know, file the frets into correct intonation. It just sounds like a freaking nightmare. Like if I can't have a CNC machine do it, that, you know, which is, you know, when I've heard about EGC super early. Like
that's funny. That is exactly where I was going with my next line of questioning. Was
I stumbled across Valeno guitars just Googling or something in like 2006. And then I was like, aluminum, that makes so much sense. And I was like, I was like working there was a machine shop on campus, and I was like in grad school, and I had to like machine my own stuff in the machine shop for my research. And I was like, and I actually literally brought a guitar in the one day and like, fit, I fit a left-handed shredder neck that I got at a pawn shop that I didn't realize was left-handed at the time onto a Teisco body that required like a 5/8 inch thick aluminum shim.
Was it actually a lefty or was it just
no? It's actually
a reverse?
Actually a lefty,
okay.
yeah, because the nut was wrong.
All right, I was just curious because that happens.
Yeah, that was so we can talk about that if we want to, but that was the time I tried to build a theremen into a guitar.
Yeah, you should talk about that.
Okay, yeah. So I had this idea of literally that, building a theremin into a guitar so that the strings would be the pitch antenna for the theremin. Mm-hmm. And then when you touch the strings, it would squelch the theremin. So you could still like play guitar normally, and then the moment you take your hands off the strings, you have a theremin.
It becomes a theremin, yeah.
Yeah. And so I actually did it. I actually like bought like a theremin PC board. It was like populated and like worked. It just didn't have an enclosure. And tried to wire it into the bridge ground wire so that the bridge ground wire and everything connected to it, including the strings, would be the theremin pitch antenna. But it didn't work, and at the time I didn't know enough about anything to understand why. I just knew that it didn't freaking work. Like if I just put like a little wire antenna on the theremin circuit, it would make noise and be great. If I hooked it up to the guitar, it would just be silent all the time, and I didn't know why. And it turns out it's because the way theremins work is you're changing the capacitance between the antenna and the ground, sort of the earth, literally the earth.
Oh, I didn't have a clue how they worked. I thought it was dark magic.
Yeah. And so like you are pretty close to earth ground yourself. And so as you get close to it, your, capacitors are like two plates spaced near each other. And the closer they are, the higher the capacitance, all else being equal. And so like you getting closer to the theremin antenna are increasing the capacitance, and the circuit is set up to sense that and change the pitch. Your iPhone uses that same technology to figure out where your finger is, right? But it's basically just capacitive touch technology, just without the touch.
Interesting.
And used to drive either a volume change in the circuit or a pitch change in the oscillator. But the guitar strings and the bridge and all that stuff being so humongous started out with way larger capacitance to ground than the circuit was designed to handle. And so it just like, it was permanently squelched and like wouldn't make any noise. And me waving my hands around it, like just wasn't a big enough, either wasn't a big enough change in capacitance or was a change in capacitance in the like already beyond where it was passed. So it may not have, in fact, actually, as I think about it, it may not have been squelched. It may have been oscillating beyond audio frequency. So I couldn't hear it.
Interesting. So is there a theremin type circuit that if it had enough, I don't know, I have no idea. I'm talking way out of my league here. If it had enough, a different circuit, could it work, or a larger circuit? Or
it absolutely could work. That particular circuit, without modifying it, could not. And I actually still have that board, and I sort of toy with the idea of finishing that guitar at some point.
That would be fun.
And I called it the Thimitar.
Of course you would. What else would you call it?
I'm also really into Floor, and the self-titled Floor album, the first track is Scimitar.
Oh yeah,
and it was like that. And when I made that, it was like early. I made that in like 2006, and so like, and I'd gotten into that Floor album in like 2003. And when I first heard that Floor album, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then like within a couple of years, I was in a band with no bassist that tuned super low, and I was like, oh, this is really relevant to my interests. And I got even deeper into it.
Good times.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. You guys, I feel like we could go all night, but I'm looking at this clock that says 102 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm thinking that I'm kind of hungry. And especially because I keep thinking about sandwiches. And
sandwiches are great.
I keep I'm gonna talk about sandwiches more. if we don't.
Yeah,
stop.
I sometimes eat a sandwich for dessert. Like I love sandwiches.
Thank
So
goodness for the
are you guys
sandwich.
like this? Like I would much rather like somebody's like, here's a meal, here's a wonderful meal that you just ate, and they're like, here's dessert. I'm like, yeah, could I have more of the meal? Like, I'm not a big dessert guy.
That's totally me.
I'm not, and every now and then, like there's like a few restaurants I go to, and I'm always like, when I sit down, I'm like, I'll remember to save room for dessert because the dessert here looks so good, and I've never had it because I never have room for dessert. And then, I eat, and the food is so good that I eat all of it, and I stuff myself, and I'm full, and then, someone comes around and asks, would you like dessert? And the answer is, I would like it, but I cannot order it at this time because I have, filled my stomach.
Yeah. They're
bursting at the seams.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. There are like a
Not
few
another bite.
desserts that I will get down for, but I usually want them like at another time. Like I ate dinner, give me like 4 hours, and then I'll eat it as a snack or something. But like right after dinner, nah. If I'm still hungry enough that I want dessert, then I probably just would rather eat more dinner, like you said.
Mm-hmm. I had dessert, like a straight up dessert, for the first time yesterday in a long time, probably like 9 months or longer, and it was worth it. It was definitely good. It was like a Reese's peanut butter cup cream pie. It was really
that sounds
good.
Pretty great. That is kind of up my alley.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite like things is Reese's peanut butter cups.
Yeah, it was like a peanut butter cream pie with whipped cream on it and peanuts on the whipped cream, and then Reese's peanut butter cups on top. I was like, all right, awesome. And a graham cracker crust. I was like, all right, I'm down with this.
Yeah.
And it was pretty good. It was good. Since we're talking about food, and I meant to ask this in the main episode, but I didn't, so oops. Electrofoods. What's that about?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'll let Matt
I'm going to have
because
to take this one
because
he
created it before we ever met.
Okay.
Actually.
Yeah.
That was his idea.
So I guess I have to. So that first band that I was in, that was like the weird soundscape stuff with the poetry that sort of later turned into a band. Mm-hmm. That band was called I Fanblades, like I, fan, like I Robot almost.
Right.
And it was like the whole, like, it was kind of like an, Internet of Things before the Internet of Things. Like, what if all of our little electronics and appliances like became sentient together and like were, it was kind of an iRobot, like they're going to take over the world kind of thing. Like there was a lot of dystopian, dark stuff going on.
This ties back into the ovens killing us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very related.
We'll go back to what is that band? Oh no, I can't think of them. They have the brilliantly titled album Software Slump.
I don't know, but that is a good title.
I don't know what that band is either.
Oh man,
that is a hilarious
They have
title.
a song that's all about like it's a lot of appliances and stuff like that. Yeah, I gotta find that.
All right, well, so while you're finding that, I'll continue the story.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. So
Granddaddy. Sorry.
Oh,
name of the band is Granddaddy.
Okay. Yeah.
I've heard of them.
Slump.
I don't know that. Yeah. I don't know that album, but I've heard of that band before.
It's really good. They talk a lot about appliances, and they're sentient.
Yeah.
They're very sad.
So anyway, like that kind of like weird mix of mechanical and electrical and organic as sort of a slightly discomforting sort of imagery. Like, I don't know. I've always been really interested in that stuff. Like when back in college, our American Society of Mechanical Engineers chapter decided to make T-shirts, and so we had to figure out like what to put on them. And so we decided to have like a T-shirt contest where people could submit designs, and then we had like, online voting, and this is like the early 2000s, so we felt really fancy. And my submission for this contest was, University of Delaware Mechanical Engineering. One day we'll build the robots that build the robots that build the robots that take over the world.
Oh no. Oh no. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
But it's hilarious.
Stop what you're doing. Stop with all that. Stop doing that. Don't do that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So my head is often thinking about, and like our band Booklegger is based on the name comes from a post-apocalyptic sci-fi novel. And, so we're just, I don't know. I'm just kind of always got those ideas floating around. Canticle for Leibowitz.
Well, nope. It went past my head. First I was like, I'll know this. Nope, I guess not.
Yeah. It's
my favorite book by far, I would say.
Yeah.
It surpassed Dune when I read it, like almost immediately.
This is impressive. Who wrote it?
Walter M. Miller Jr. So he wrote 2 books in his lifetime. He wrote Canticle for Leibowitz, and then 40 years later, he wrote a sequel, which he almost finished before committing suicide.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah. And those are the only 2 books that he ever wrote. He wrote some short stories and some other stuff. But he was he just lived with his wife in Florida and, didn't really I'm sure he had a circle of friends or whatever, but he was a really private person and just, struggled with writer's block and depression and all kinds of stuff. And he was working on this book and he had this Terry Bisson, I think, is another sci-fi author. And he basically said to Terry, hey, I'm working on this sequel to Canticle. I've been stuck for a long time. If anything happens to me, I want you to take all my notes and finish it. And within a couple months, he was gone.
Oh man!
And so Terry Bisson took this material and expected to find just a mess because he'd been writer's blocked on this book for years. And what he found was basically the notes for how the entire 4/5 of the book was written and done, and the last 1/5 had notes for how everything was supposed to fit together. And so all Terry Bisson had to do was just kind of flesh it out. And follow the paint by numbers that Walter M. Miller Jr. left for him to finish it up. Yeah. And so the first book, Canticle. Okay, so
more monks.
Yeah, more monks.
All right.
Kind of into monks too, weirdly. So it's the 80s. And the book was written in 57, 58. Yeah. So the 80s was the future at this point. There's a nuclear war, global thermonuclear war, nuclear winter afterwards, radiation poisoning kind of flowing throughout the world. The survivors of this nuclear war, the regular everyday people are pissed and basically blame this tragedy that they're experiencing on, I think first, the politicians, and then the scientists and engineers who developed the nuclear weapons, and then, the other scientists and engineers, and they kind of just work their way down to all the smart people. And eventually, over the years, anyone who could read, and they basically take the earth back to the dark ages over the course of a couple hundred years.
Yeah. There's a lot of corollary between that time and the fall of the Roman Empire and the burning of the Library of Alexandria.
And so there's an electrical engineer who built nuclear weapons so the Catholic Church survives the simplification, as they called it.
Yeah.
And so there's this electrical engineer, Isaac Edward Leibowitz, who joins the Catholic Church, becomes a monk, and founds an order of monks dedicated to saving the world's knowledge, basically, secretly. Because if these regular everyday people discover you can read, they will, burn you or hang you or stone you or whatever. Right. So these monks basically travel throughout, wherever they can get. So they set up a monastery in the desert in the Southwest, basically New Mexico. And they're actually, the early days, it wasn't even a monastery. They're just burying casks of all these books that they find just to hide them until the world's ready for them again. So they're going throughout, all over the country trying to find books that have been hidden away or, got misplaced, and just sort of smuggle them back to this desert so they can bury them and save them.
And they're the bookleggers.
So that's the name of our band.
I see.
Yeah. But everything I just said is the background before the first story starts.
Yeah.
Like the Canticle for Leibowitz is 3 vignettes, and the first vignette takes place 600 years after everything I just said. And then the second one is 600 years later, and then the third one is 600 years after that.
Oh, this sounds like all kinds of my business. That's all.
It's a fantastic book.
Good.
It really is.
And the sequel takes place just after the second vignette. And like, so the first book is like, I was saying this to Carl because I've read the first book 3 times, and I've listened to the audiobook maybe 4 times.
He's a fan.
Yeah.
He likes it a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. And I've read the sequel like 1.5 times, but I've been so busy lately. Like I've been wanting to read it and like get back into it, and I just haven't had time to like sit down and read it. But I have a long commute, and I've been building a lot of pedals, and I like listening to stuff when I build pedals. So I was trying to find an audiobook of the second book, and it just like didn't exist. And I finally found one on tape. So I'm like listening to it again on tape in the one vehicle I have that still has a tape player. But anyway, so I realized that like the first book with the 3 vignettes, it's like they're so good and they're so tight and they're so well written, but it's still like ultimately it's like kind of pop music, right? Like it's the Beatles, and that's great. Like that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's still very like it's easy to get into, it's easy to digest. The sequel is like a Neurosis album. Like it's just epic and deep and layered and in detail. And they're both great in their own way, but they're very different.
That's fascinating.
40 years to write a book. I think.
Yeah. I would imagine. I haven't tried. And like the freaking world building is just insane.
Yeah.
And he was, he was writing it he wrote the first one in the 50s. And so like, like his vision of future computery things when they get there is like, it's still very analog and like required, you got to adjust the trimmers and it, like digital technology was, barely in anyone's mind in the 50s.
Yeah.
And very much not in the even sci-fi authors' minds at that point. So, but other than the sort of the analog nature of future technology, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. I did just write this down. I'm like, I gotta find this later.
Yeah.
Highly recommended.
Highly recommended. Yeah. It's so good.
This might be shocking to you, but I'm like, I'm gonna go to the library tomorrow and check this out.
Sweet.
If it's there. Like this sounds like.
I think that it will be, because I feel like, didn't you tell me that it's often on like top, whatever.
Yeah, like if you look at if you Google like best sci-fi novels ever, like it tends to show up on those lists, but it's also just like really not in the modern consciousness these days.
It's not Fahrenheit or
right.
Yeah,
it's not Dune. It's not Fahrenheit. Yeah. It's not.
They haven't made a movie, I think, is the problem.
Right.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's funny that when you were talking about them burying the books and stuff, I thought in my mind, I was like, there's not entirely, but there's kind of a parallel to Fahrenheit in that a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
there is different reasons for the destruction or hiding of the books, but like it's interesting that 2 guys kind of around the same-ish time frame had the concept that knowledge needs to get wiped out.
I think they're within a year of each other.
I think so.
So I think they were working on them concurrently.
That's
and I know that the 3 vignettes originally appeared in simpler form in magazines.
Okay.
Like they were just like short stories. Each one was like a short story that he wrote, and he realized he had 3 of them in the same world, and kind of put them together and expanded on them. And it's what's crazy is actually some of my favorite parts of the first book are the connective tissue between the vignettes. Like the writing is so good. Like it's like there's certain sections that I just read it and I'm like, this is a freaking prose poem. Like it's so beautifully written.
There's certain lines, I'm trying to remember the exact one. There's one where I think one of the people in charge like cuts himself, and he's like, "Wrong blood, Christ, yours, not mine." It's just, it's hilarious.
And there's a lot of philosophy and theology and a lot of Latin in these books. And like there's Wikipedia articles with like the list of Latin phrases, and there's like puns in Latin, or like he'll take a phrase from, like a Latin phrase from the Bible, or a Latin phrase from that's just like a common idiom, and like twist it and like it's like a joke, one monk making a joke to another, making a pun in Latin with this common phrase. And it's the kind of stuff that like you either have to just know it, or you got to look it up, or it's just going to go right over your head.
Good thing we have the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no kidding. Like, can you imagine reading that in 1974 and being like, well, I don't know, boy. It's
it would have been a lot harder for sure.
Just like,
but you might have known
my iPhone real quick.
I mean, you get a lot of it from context. Like you can enjoy the book without that, because it's not hard to read either. Like the first one just like it just blows by you, and it's it goes by so fast, even with all of that deep philosophy and theology and stuff just kind of embedded in it, and it's so entwined into the nature of the story that you don't even notice it's there until it's like at you.
That's really interesting. Really, really interesting.
Easier then too, because I think that's pre-Vatican II, isn't it?
It is, yeah, that's true.
So more people were at least exposed to Latin. I mean, not everyone understood it, but like you took Latin classes, it was still pretty popular.
And that's the other part of that story too, is that Walter M. Miller Jr. Flew bombing raids in World War II, and he was like,
"Oh, I didn't know that."
He was like in the bomber. I think he was like a bombardier, or like the guy who actually aims the bombs. Okay. He flew on a mission. He flew on a mission to like that was like this. I think the Nazis were using some super old, ancient cathedral, like Catholic cathedral, as like a base of operations or something. And so there's a decision about like, well, we really need to get rid of this base, but it's also this like ancient cathedral, and they decided to bomb it, and he was on that bombing raid that bombed that cathedral. And then like a decade later, he's writing books about like knowledge and Catholic monks, this weird order of Leibowitzian monks, and like just all of this stuff. It all kind of ties in. Like it's kind of clear that like that kind of made an impression on him, and it stuck with him.
Yeah, I'm sure he felt some level of responsibility for destroying this old, important structure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even though he clearly didn't really have a choice in the matter, but
right. Yeah. I mean, he didn't. They weren't his orders.
Right.
He just had to follow them.
World War II, good sci-fi writers. Vonnegut was also.
Yeah.
He was in
that's true.
Dresden, when they firebombed it.
I didn't. I don't think I knew that. I don't know that much about Vonnegut other than the little that I've read of him. I didn't realize he was.
Yeah, I believe he was.
I guess.
I believe he was in the when they firebombed Dresden. I believe he was there as a prisoner of war.
Because I think his first book was like he just had all these like stories that he would like tell people about that time, and I don't know, his wife or somebody was like, you should like write those down. And I think that's what became Slaughterhouse-5. I may have just totally twisted all of that.
Maybe. I don't think that was his first book, but it was one of his first books.
Yeah. I literally everything I just said may be wrong. But that was what was in my head.
Well, that's for you, the listeners, to go and Google and correct us.
Somebody Google that and prove me wrong.
Yeah, we'll find out. Figure it out.
I was just saying it could happen, and that's homework. You just made the challenge.
Yeah, I sure did. Yeah,
throw down.
I'm probably wrong. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah,
I'm probably wrong.
I'm not sure.
I'm just gonna keep making up stories about famous sci-fi writers.
So since we're so far into this at this point, I feel like I should like. I had a question pop up back when we were talking about the AI stuff, or the the machines taking over. And I
don't think I ever quite finished saying where Electrofoods came from.
Oh yeah, no, you didn't.
That's
okay.
Yeah, whatever. No big deal.
But because you're an engineer, I I feel like you'll have an answer for this because it's something I've been thinking about probably more than necessary, which is like thinking about AI and the way things are going and just like it almost seems inevitable that if barring any natural disasters or nuclear winter or aliens coming and beaming us away or anything else, just like if we just keep going down the same path that we're going down as far as technology goes, it seems to me almost inevitable that the robots will take over and see us as unnecessary and actually a problem to the continued survival of the planet. I know that sounds a little bit dramatic, but I feel like that's kind of inevitable if we keep going the way we're going. Probably not in our lifetimes, but in the not so distant future, or that's just the way I feel about it. The way things have just advanced so quickly in my lifetime. Do you feel any level of, not to make you feel like this is on your shoulders, but as somebody who works in that area, do you feel like there's a level of responsibility there in the science and engineering community that like maybe things need to slow down a little bit in some ways? That's what I'm wondering.
I'm sure there are people who do feel that way. So I guess I'm going to take a step back and say that for the most part, I would say I think I agree with you overall, which maybe is scarier than whatever else I was about to say. I think just fundamentally, like artificial intelligence, some sort of sentience, I'm going to say coming online, to use the Terminator 2 reference, or Terminator 1, either way, of Skynet. Yeah. It came online at whatever that date was, 1992. I don't know. Anyway, I think it's going to happen in, I don't know how long, but it's not long. I think my best guess is some sort of sentience is going to happen in my lifetime. It may happen and then we don't realize it's happened for a bunch of years.
Right.
And it sort of retrospectively realized like, oh yeah, that counted. That's my best guess. And I think quickly we're going to have to start dealing with human rights issues in regards to artificial intelligences. Like very quickly, that's going to be a thing that we're going to have to think about real hard.
Right, because where do you say that consciousness starts? And
exactly,
and
once you have consciousness, you have, this thing must have rights of some kind,
right?
But legally, it isn't going to, because there's no category that is defined there.
Right, and then how do you? And I mean, I think that's a thing that scientists and philosophers are still struggling with defining what consciousness is. I mean, it's sort of one of those things where we have an ever-evolving model,
right?
That's like, we think it's like this, and I mean, there's parts of like particle physics and string theories still an idea. It's been around for a while.
And the fact it works pretty good. To go there, the fact that we even maybe have to go to like particle physics and string theory to define what consciousness is just like kind of mind blowing. But it might be true.
And that's what, as I studied philosophy in college, and that was a thing that someone's like, well, do you believe in determinism then? Like, you're a philosophy major, like, tell me how it is. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'd like to think that I have free will, but I believe that the physical laws of the universe probably govern more of my life and my abilities than I have. So if you like make me make a choice, I'll say I'm a hard determinist, but I don't, you can't act.
I mean, if you get into issues of free will, you have to define your self versus your conscious self, and whether those are different things. Not to get too esoteric here.
Yeah.
But like, if the true self of you is only your conscious self, and you decide to drink a glass of water, and you can sort of prove that like your body started moving toward getting up to go get that glass of water before you were consciously aware of it. Like, you can do those. I was a psychology minor in college.
Yeah.
So you can actually do those cognitive psychology experiments and like prove that like the action potentials for people's neurons to like start getting up occur before they're consciously aware that they're going to get up out of a chair.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see that.
Yeah, and
we
so
would
like
have to,
right.
To
So like is that, you know? So like some people would see that and say, oh well, free will is an illusion. You don't have free will because you didn't consciously choose to get up. But my argument is that like, okay, but that the part of your brain that decided to get up before you were consciously aware of it is still you. So
right.
That's still your free will to get up. It was just not the conscious part of you.
Yeah, but then you go to get cellular. You're like, well, your body needs water, so your body's telling, you know, your subconscious part of your body says, hey, I'm thirsty.
Right. So I look at that and I still say that that's free will. Right. But like no one can agree on this stuff, and trying like, I guess here's where I'm at is we're as a species really bad at treating humans like with the respect that they deserve. And I am just terrified of the way that we're going to treat artificial intelligences and artificial sentient beings.
What I'm saying, I think like in the where I was going with the line of question is not like, will it happen, or like is not what to do when they get here. My line of questioning was, now you guys are talking about all your fancy schooling. I'm an ex-mechanic. I'm an ex-mechanic. I majored in wrenches and grease. So, you know,
hey man,
my mental
that's cool too.
My mental abilities and my thought processes are not probably quite as developed on these things. So take everything I say with a grain of salt.
That's fair.
My question was like, do you think we have a responsibility to prevent it from happening in the first place? Like, should we intentionally slow down technological progress to try to avoid that ever becoming an issue?
I guess I was trying to answer your question sideways, which is I don't think we can. I think if we try to slow it down, we will fail because not enough people feel that burden of responsibility, because I think most people working directly in that field don't actually believe that they're anywhere close to doing that thing. So they're not really worried about it yet.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing, is you don't want to be worried about it when you're close to it, because then it's too late.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So like, I guess I sort of am conscious of that and feel some responsibility there, but I'm also not going to be the person who causes any of that bad stuff to happen, because I don't work directly with AIs in any way, shape, or form, much as I might actually like to. But I think what we can do is start thinking about how we want to treat these conscious beings, these artificial conscious beings now, and sort of develop that ethos of anything with any kind of sentience or consciousness, be it human, dolphin, blue whale, or program on a computer, deserves to be treated with an equal amount of respect. And if, kind of ingrain that ethos into the culture so that when it does happen, we aren't just totally awful to them. And then they maybe don't feel the need to eliminate us when they get more powerful than we are inevitably.
I don't even know, I don't even know if that would be enough. Like, I don't know, I'm very negative on the whole. Don't get me wrong. I love technology. Here I am doing a podcast with this technology. Right. Like,
yeah.
But like, I've been wondering about this stuff a lot, because I think, like, I think we could, if they, when it quote unquote comes online, if we were like the sweetest thing ever and like took care of it like it was a human, and like made it, one of us sort of. I still think that because humans are so human and imperfect and messy in all of our functions, basically, no matter how hard we try, the robots at some point will say, these guys are just messing everything up. We could do this so much better. Why, we need to control them in some way, shape, or form. I think that's an inevitability, maybe because I read too many sci-fi novels. But like, I just feel like they're gonna see us as a problem, no matter how good we are to them in the early stages.
I mean, the other thing I think it is like, I try not to think of any group in a monolithic way, right? So like, there are factions of thought in every organization and every group, and even if the exterior appears monolithic, it doesn't mean that isn't going on. And so like, I feel like any kind of group of artificial intelligences has to be the same way, right? And if they're truly sentient and truly intelligent, then they're going to have a capacity for creativity and play and some appreciation of art in some manner. Like, I fundamentally believe, I guess, sort of coming to this realization now as I say it, that intelligence and sentience go hand in hand with play. Like, all intelligent creatures play. Like, rats play, dolphins play, whales play, that, you know, language, song, play, and art to some extent. Like, whales have songs that they share, and like, they change, and they, like, you can track, like, a certain song is a hit in the whale community because it like travels throughout all the different whales and they all sing the same song. And then, like, you know, a few months later, like, another one gets popular and they all, like, I feel like any sentient entity is going to have that same capacity. And so like, I'm kind of just betting on enough of them will be fascinated with our weird idiosyncrasies and want to collaborate in some artistic way, that they won't eliminate us because we amuse them, and that they want to be friends and they want to like make stuff together.
They won't kill all of us.
Yeah, they won't kill us because they want to be in our bands, I guess, is where I'm at.
So you're saying I'm going to have to start playing guitar again because I can't compete with an AI robot, man. It's just they could have extra limbs, and I mean, talk about quantizing, you know?
Yeah, and they're going to have like the ear equivalent of like mantis shrimp eyes, so they can hear they can hear down to like 0.1 hertz, and they can hear up into the ultrasonic.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, there, I let one.
Hey, you did good. 135 minutes.
That's about totally as long as I could go. I think that might be it.
There was one might be my limit. There was one other one that happened in there.
Was there really?
There was. Yeah. I didn't hear it, so I didn't write it down.
Yeah, I missed it too.
I'm gonna have to listen to this whole thing.
I think it was after we went Patreon, but or towards the end there. It was the P word.
I was trying so hard.
Somewhere in there.
Oh. Well,
I think we did well.
Yeah,
we'll find it.
Yeah,
we'll find it.
If we could put in a Metalocalypse squeal, that'd be
if
awesome.
only there was like some sort of AI that could like listen to the whole thing real fast and tell us.
Yeah, no kidding. Because you know what? There's one thing that I hate more than listening to Bro Country, and that is listening to my own voice on the podcast. So.
You got a good voice, though, I have to say.
Yeah, I like your voice.
I'm going to be really upset, I think, listening to my own voice.
Oh, yeah, I always hate listening to my own voice.
You guys sound great.
See, I think it's just that it's weird because you hear your own voice with the resonance inside your head, so it never sounds to you like it sounds to everybody else. Mm-hmm. So it's a weird thing. I think I was reading an interview and like Kim Deal says that it's like still, like, and I'm like, you've been singing and recording music since for like 30 something almost 40 years, maybe 40 years, because she was playing when she was a kid, and you still haven't really like gotten used to it.
It's a really weird thing.
Blows my mind. It is a weird thing, but I mean,
it's very strange.
Yeah.
But well, thank you guys for coming on. I think we should probably wrap this up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
we went for a bit. Sorry.
No, this is great. This is great. Yeah. This will be this is going to be the longest Patreon. We usually do about between 10 and 30. So this is the longest Patreon and definitely the heaviest. Well, actually, no. I take that back. There was some pretty heavy personal stuff we talked about on one with Sean Arbo from Gun Street Wiring. He had a very heavy personal story he got into.
Yeah, I think you had said that on one of them that I listened to recently, where you talked about like, oh, well, that one I cried. So
that was that
wasn't that one.
That wasn't that one. That was a public one. That was with Joshua Spataro from Righteous Sound Pickups. So
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I mixed those up.
That's okay. But no, Sean's story is very heavy too. He was sick for like most of his life. And then like overprescribed a bunch of medications that he shouldn't have been taking that caused him some problems. And it all comes down to he found out later, like after he just had to like buckle down and figure it out, like it was all down to his diet. And so like all of these drugs he'd been taking forever was just like messed him up. And his attitude towards, like, I would have been furious, you know, and his attitude was like really refreshing and like, that's how I should be, like type of thing.
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah, me too.
I'll try to hook you guys up with he didn't go into it too much on his actual interview.
Okay.
It's on the Patreon one. He's a really good guy. He sponsors a podcast. He's awesome.
Sweet. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that we could come and talk for a long time.
Well, here, let's wrap this thing up because we still have a few things to talk about off air, sort of, kind of. Nothing important.
Cool. Okay, cool. Sounds good.
All right, bye, guys.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, there you have it. There is a shining example of what some of the episodes of the Tone Mob Patreon look like. So if you like extra episodes every week coming at you, you can go over there, and for as little as $5 a month, you can get extra episodes every week coming straight to your favorite podcast player. So yeah, that's something I've been wanting to do for a while, and I guess it just kind of worked out that due to technical gremlins, you get to hear it this week. I was going to throw it in a couple weeks, but we shuffled it around. So anyway, hopefully I can get the files squared away, and either way, we'll get to listen to those episodes. I'll figure it out, but I just can't do it on crunch time, apparently. So there you go. If you have any questions, hit me up at info@tonemob.com via email or on any of the socials. I'm at the Tone Mob. And if you want to hang out and get to know us a little bit better, then you can hang out in the Facebook group where there's all kinds of weirdos like myself hanging out and theorizing and talking about pizza and guitar pedals and all that good stuff. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to sign off. I hope you guys have a good week, and I will talk to you next time. Bye. One last thing before we totally sign off here, I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.